I'm a little concerned by the contents of an email exchange between one of you, my viewers, and a BBC data protection officer with regard to questions about the TV licensing fee. My viewer said that they were somewhat intimidated by the wording in the exchange, a comment with which I would agree. I think most viewers would be intimidated by the wording for the meaning, which I'll come on to in a moment. And secondly, my viewer didn't seem to understand the legality and the correctness behind the wording in the email. Another comment with which I have to agree, because the wording itself isn't strictly accurate. Now, whilst it might be describing a scenario where with a bit more information, it would be accurate. If you read into the full website or you read into the full legislation and so on, that would make it right. A bit like the bane and antidote scenario for defamation, i.e. you can't simply infer something from the title of an article without reading the article if the article gives it greater context to better understand it. But that doesn't really apply here. And just as a brief interlude, you're used to these by now, if you would please join me on my new channel, Daniel Shansmith, linked in the description below. I'm growing that channel to help you build wealth. I've really enjoyed helping you to understand law here and my personal views over on Black Belt Secrets, but if you want to build wealth, join me on my new channel, Daniel Shansmith, linked below. I'd love to have you there. It's going to be a lot of fun, but now back to the video. Now, whilst keeping all parties anonymous, I am going to read part of this email exchange to you. And it's the particular wording that I think makes this quite concerning, because one paragraph in particular begins with the wording "for the avoidance of doubt," which in any standard sense would mean this is an absolute definitive word on the matter and there isn't any more to it. That's why we write "for the avoidance of doubt." The paragraph is intended to clear up any doubt. The paragraph reads as follows: "For the avoidance of doubt, once the no license needed status, NLN, is removed," now just pausing to explain this, if you've told TV licensing that you do not need a license for your address because you do not watch or record live TV or use BBC iPlayer, and you've not installed any equipment for any of that purpose, then you don't need a license. If you've informed them of that, that is an NLN status, no license needed status, which, as it happens, I would recommend that you do, just so that they should comply with your request not to receive any further correspondence for a period of time, which is usually 2 to 3 years. But that aside, that's what the NLN status is. However, after a period of time, the NLN status is removed regardless. So let's read on. Once the NLN status is removed, the address will be unlicensed. And the next part is the bit that I take issue with. As it is a legal requirement to hold a TV license, this address will now be sent correspondence alerting it to the requirements under the Communications Act 2003 to hold a license. If a license is not taken out for this address, or alternatively an NLN declaration made, this may lead to enforcement action. Now, whilst on a very, very strict reading of that paragraph, it might well be correct. With full respect to every viewer watching, I suspect that some people reading that may infer that it is a legal requirement to hold a TV license or to declare that you don't need one, else face enforcement action, which is not quite the case. Because if we break this paragraph down into what it really means, if you read it very carefully, it says, if the NLN status is removed, then correspondence will be sent alerting the address to the requirements. But that is only to say, if you need a license, you need to buy one. But it's worded in such a way that it might make some people think that you have a requirement to hold a license, i.e. it says, and again, as I mentioned earlier, it says "for the avoidance of doubt," which usually removes any need to read anything else into this paragraph. It says the requirements under the Act to hold a license. So reasonably, most people will infer that you do in fact need to hold a license. Or, in the alternative that it offers, making a no license needed declaration, else you may have enforcement action. Now, that paragraph in itself I take issue with the wording. It may just be a poor choice of words, but if somebody receives that, they may inadvertently feel that they have to pay for a license regardless of whether they need one or not, and the two are not the same thing. Elsewhere in the same correspondence, and this is really why I take issue with them, regardless of this paragraph standing on its own with the "for the avoidance of doubt" prefix, but in the context of the wider exchange, the two other snippets of paragraph to me are important as follows, which is why I'm concerned by it. One such paragraph, very short one, says the following: a household either needs to hold a TV license or declare that a license is not needed. NLN. They are the only two options that apply, which of course is not true. The third option is you do not need a license, and there is, for my avoidance of doubt, no obligation upon you to make any declaration that no license is needed. I might recommend that you do that to avoid these letters coming to you and just for a period of time to not hear from TV licensing again. That would be my recommendation. However, there's no legal obligation to do so. So this paragraph, in my view, is wrong. It says they are the only two options that apply. But that's not true. The third option is you do nothing and ignore the correspondence if you do not need a TV license, because there is no compulsion to provide a declaration to the contrary. The other paragraph linked to this one, reinforcing the statement, which I think is wrong, says, I'm sorry if you find the wording intimidating. That is not the intention. It is merely a statement of fact to ensure you have the full information. But of course, that's not the full information. The full information would be, if you don't make a declaration that you don't need a TV license, we will continue to send you this correspondence, and we may send someone out to your address under the common law implied right of access to visit the property. And if we did find sufficient evidence to apply for a warrant to enter the address to search for further evidence that you watch or record live TV, then we'll do any of those things. That would be the full information. However, the legal requirement to declare that you do not need a TV license doesn't exist. And so, as I say, I'm somewhat concerned that if just one person has been sent correspondence like this, many more people may be led to believe that it is a legal requirement to hold a license or make a declaration, which is not, as this suggests, the full information. The full information is you either have to have a license if you meet the requirements under the legislation, which is watching or recording live TV, use BBC iPlayer, or installing any apparatus for that purpose. And any of those apply on any device and anywhere in your house. And there are some narrow exceptions outside of your house, but I'll come to those in another video. Or if you don't need a license, then you don't pay for one. You can make the declaration, which will tell them to stop bothering you for a couple of years or so. Even that's not defined in law. And they will probably stop bothering you for a couple of years or so, which would be my recommendation, because that's the easier way out of this. Although some people do report that that doesn't work. Now, those are the three options: buy a license, don't buy a license, and tell them that you don't need a license, or just ignore it. And if you ignore it and they want to prosecute you, if you are breaking the law, that's down to them. They must prove it, and it's their case to prove, and you can then defend it. And if you do get a notice of charge for whatever reason, then I do suggest that you don't ignore it and you do respond to it. You either plead guilty if you really are guilty, or you plead not guilty if you really don't need a TV license, you don't watch or record live TV, BBC iPlayer, and so on. Otherwise, it will end up in the single justice procedure, which you may be convicted in your absence if you don't respond to the charge notice within 21 days. So I hope that is helpful to anybody that receives what I can understand to be intimidating wording in emails such as this. But this is a fuller information, And obviously, you need to go and read the full legislation and, if necessary, take formal advice if you are still in any way unsure, or indeed you want to rely on any of this information as legal advice, because this video cannot be legal advice for those reasons. But in the meantime, if you do find that useful, please do bop the like button and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.